Hi, this is Scott Ware, the publisher of Radiance Magazine and president of Radiance Multidimensional Media, on the interview show on Xpnsion Network, which is found usually on Roku and Amazon Fire Stick and social media. I have with me today an author, a speaker, a Reiki master as well, Rebecca Thompson. Say hello, Rebecca.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here today. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you. So you're a speaker, writer, consultant, facilitator, and coach with more than 30 years in the manufacturing, aerospace, and healthcare industries. But that's just part of the story. You embarked on a healing journey, which led you to explore a variety of spiritual practices where you learned how to love yourself. Just amazing. You're a Reiki master, certified crystal therapist, and shamanic coach, all of which you incorporate into your consulting and coaching practice. And you've read a very readable book, because I've been reading it. I haven't finished it, but it's very readable, about your spiritual awakening, going through a difficult marriage and taking you to the present. So it sounds like that book was instrumental in your healing as well. Would you say that?
Absolutely, Scott. I didn't even know the end of the story when I started writing the book. And so it definitely helped me clarify my thinking and heal my heart.
So I imagine you might even help other people do the same to get healing in themselves, write the story of their life. Is that part of your consulting as well?
Yes, I'd love to be able to help people do that. I think that it's very important. In fact, just the other day, someone emailed me and asked me about that and said that, wow, they'd like to write their own memoir because it did seem to be so valuable for me, and could I help them? So absolutely.
Well, and like I said, your story, it's very readable. I encourage people to get the book. It's a good read. Now, the pain you experienced in that marriage, when you did find out your ex-husband was an alcoholic, and how that affected your family as a whole, was difficult at the time, but really was the beginning of your spiritual awakening, wouldn't you say?
It really was. So yes, as difficult as it was to go through that, I am a different person today, and a much better and happier person today than I was.
So what you talk about in your book, we use the word spiritual. Metaphysical is another term we use. You were living a certain kind of life where you were not aware of metaphysics, and then you say that you started getting invitations to the metaphysical part of life. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so I had never been exposed to anything metaphysical in nature. I was raised as a Protestant small town girl in Pennsylvania, and teaching Sunday school and singing in the choir and living my life. I was an industrial engineer, so I was a scientist and very skeptical of anything that fell outside of that realm. And sure. I had an opportunity to make a move based on my ex-husband's career, and we moved from Rochester, New York to Raleigh, North Carolina. And I was invited to attend a Unitarian church. And as part of that experience, I got exposed to a lot of other things. First, I was invited to participate in a dowsing class. I didn't know anything about dowsing.
Can you tell us about what is a Unitarian church? What are their beliefs, if any?
Their beliefs are very inclusive. They don't have their own dogma. Anywhere you are on your spiritual journey is okay. Unitarian church, so they welcome people of all faiths and celebrate all sorts of different holidays, whether they're Jewish, Christian, Native American, Hindu. Everything is celebrated there. So I would call it a very intellectual kind of community, because it looks at a lot of different faiths and explores them intellectually as well as spiritually.
I know there's Unitarian churches all around the country, and there's a lot of them that start with called unity of, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually unity is slightly different from unity. Unitarian is somewhat different from unity. From Unitarian church, again, in my string of experiences that I was invited to over a number of years, I ended up at a unity church, and they usually do start with that, Unity of Tustin, Unity of South Bay. You'll see those. Mm-hmm. And they describe themselves as a progressive Christian community. So primarily they will talk about Jesus, but more as a way shower than as a savior. And they don't believe that people needed to be saved from sins, but they do look to Jesus as someone who kind of showed the way towards enlightenment, as well as Buddha and others.
Okay, so go ahead and continue your story there.
Okay, So I was talking a little bit about moving from my life as scientist, engineer, skeptic to more of a metaphysical focus. And as I said, I just started to be invited to some different things. And the first one was a dowsing class. I didn't know anything about dowsing other than, I thought that's just somebody with a forked stick trying to find water, right?
Right.
But someone that I respected in my church community had invited my daughter and I to participate in this activity and gave us a set of dowsing rods. And I was so amazed when, she was teaching us how to use them. And I thought, this isn't going to work, She sent us off in a corner to kind of practice and said, learn your own yes and response from these rods. And I thought, forget it. I'm just going to, play with this for a few minutes and then I'll gather up my daughter and we'll just go home and we'll laugh, about
Right.
the way home, right? Like, why did we go to this? But it was so amazing because, I sat with my rods and the first thing you do is say, show me a yes. And then the rods, you hold them a certain way and the rods start to perform and they would cross over each other. They'd both go to the right or go to the left, depending on what you were asking. And this happened over and over again. And I kept trying to hold more and more still, that I'm not influencing it. And so I started to realize that there was an energy out there that was beyond my control and, that there was more to life than just what I had thought. And so that was my first exposure and just got very excited about that.
Well, and it's the energy out there that you're connected to. So you might even say it's in here, because it wasn't the rod itself that was creating the connection with. What was it? Water you were finding, or?
No, just any kind of objects or asking questions, asking yes and no questions and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
Have you ever done that thing where you're standing, and when you ask yourself a question, when you lean forward, that's a yes, and you go back, that's a no?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Since then, I've been exposed to this. Yes.
Yeah, I found that very helpful when it's just, should I or shouldn't I? And then I get my answer and then I'm not sure. So I ask it a different way and I keep getting the same answer. So it's like the body knows, the brain gets in the way, right? The filter, the brain gets in the way of our true alignment in essence, where we know we're plugged into intuition and all of that. And when we see we're getting in our way too much, doing something using a dowsing rod, a pendulum, or different devices, or just our own body, can even help you determine what groceries to buy in the store, which orange that your hand is hovering over. Right? So
exactly, and that's exactly what I found out. And I like to use a pendulum now. That's kind of my tool of choice. But I agree, the body doesn't lie. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so that was one of the first indications of an expanded life that was available to you, and you started investigating through taking classes, reading books.
Yeah, and a lot of it was just people. I'd go to a class and then I'd meet someone there and then they'd invite me to the next thing. So through the dowsing class, I learned about Reiki from some of the women that were taking the dowsing class. And so I went to a class and I ultimately became a Reiki master. Meanwhile, back in my career, my corporate career, I was learning about coaching. And I was asked to take over the coaching process for executives and high potential young people in our organization. And so I went off and took a coaching program. And, so I was learning about that and so I had these kind of parallel paths going on, right? And so I started meeting people through the coaching program that were also introducing me to things. And so I met this woman who was a shamanic coach, how she described herself. And so
in the corporate world, you met her.
In the corporate world, I met her. Yes, she was through the coaching program. There are all different kinds of coaches, and of course, I was seeking out these kinds of things by now. Kind of connecting up with these people. I was attracting them, and so I met someone who introduced me to the Shamanic Coach, and I took several courses from her in working with spirit animals and learning to do shamanic journeys on behalf of people and soul retrievals and that kind of thing. And so learned to incorporate that into my coaching. I couldn't do that so much in the corporate world, but that's what led me to ultimately start my own coaching practice.
Okay, was there a point where there was conflict? You didn't want the corporate world to know what you were doing in the metaphysical world, or it sort of flowed? Yeah,
I would say there were times that I felt like I had to hide myself. And that was just kind of exploring my own identity and how much do I want to reveal and how much is going to be okay, safe to reveal, right? And I do find I still do work in the corporate world, and I do reveal much more of who I really am now. And now it's okay to talk about spirit animals, or, you know, to talk about energy. It's much more mainstream than it was, you know, say 10 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember when you first took that dowsing class, what was the impetus that drove you to do that? What was that first step?
To actually take the class? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd say it was more, my daughter and I had joined this church, and we were doing some volunteer work, and the woman who was leading the volunteer work was just someone that we really highly respected and enjoyed. And she did this. It was more, we were just kind of intrigued because we had this connection with this person, more so than the subject matter itself. Like I said, I didn't know anything about dowsing. We didn't know what we were getting into. It's like, well, it'll be a fun day. Let's just do it.
Well, so there was a connection you had with her. You trusted her. I imagine the same thing happened even when you joined the Unitarian Church in the first place. That particular step, there must have been something.
Well, what had happened there, as I said, I was raised in the Presbyterian Church. I was a Protestant all my life. And in my work in the corporate world, I was doing a lot of diversity training. And I had a lot of friends that were gay, and I would hear their stories about being rejected by their families, being rejected by their churches, and really question, what is it that I belong to, you know, and what do I really want? And so I was questioning my involvement in the church I was in. And so that when I moved, I mentioned that I moved from Rochester, New York to Raleigh, North Carolina. And I like church. I like to sing and, you know, being in the choir and all this. I like it. I like worship. And so I was looking for a new type of church experience. And that's when I decided to join the Unitarian Universalist Church at that time.
Okay. So the beginning of your expansion was you had gay friends, so you had a love for them, and you didn't understand why they couldn't be included. Your heart went out to them, I imagine.
Yes, exactly.
And then an actual physical move, a change of scenery, also helped maybe provoke, and that was just the perfect time for you to be open to another experience. So it was just interesting sort of documenting those steps.
Yeah. It just it created a space for me to have a fresh start, the actual physical. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Invented myself.
So when and it's funny, a lot of people don't understand, they can do Reiki too. They can hold their hands over someone's body and actually feel things. They can feel perhaps, you know, densities in there, or anything. I mean, that just with a little bit of practice and a little bit of sensitivity, they too can do that. And do you teach that as well? And do you teach it online?
Absolutely, anyone can learn to do Reiki. I haven't taught it online. I guess that's a great idea. I have given overviews, like a Saturday morning workshop at my church and that kind of thing. But that's a neat idea. Thanks for that.
It's a good time to do it that way, yeah.
For sure.
And I know, do you give any kind of sample of your book, by the way, online? Do you give any sample chapters? Because I feel like if people read just that first chapter or two, they'd get pulled in.
They'd be hooked. I'd be happy to offer that, like the first chapter or two. We haven't really talked about it, but I have another book, and what we've been offering with that is a partnership with a friend of mine, Darlene Ryan, from when I worked in the corporate world in Rochester, New York, and we had been doing a life planning process together for many years as a result of a training that we took together, and we made it our own over the years. We kind of evolved it into something more than what we took in the training class. And for 20 years, we've been doing this, and we started to tell people about it, and they'd say, you guys should write a book about that. And so we started to plan to do that. And part of our process is we read books together. We read about or more books a year, and we have other stuff that we're each but we make a plan every year, and we talk through our goals for the year and plans, and we go on a retreat actually to do this at the beginning of every year and spend a few days doing a life plan, and then we check on ourselves, you know, throughout the year. We talk, and the name of the book is Sunday at 8:30, and the reason it's called that is because we talk on the phone every Sunday night at 8:30, and we've been doing so for many years. But part of our process is reading books together, and so at the end of the book, there's an appendix with over 200 books, the books that we've read together over those years, and the appendix only goes through 2018. So what I've been offering on my website now is that if you want the 2019 and the 2020 book list. Just opt in with your email and I'd be happy to send you that. But that's a great idea that I could also offer to send the first chapter of Rebecca Rising.
Okay, so anyone who sees this interview, then, if they mention they saw, they can mention Radiance or the interview show on Xpnsion Network, that you would offer the first chapter or two. I tell you, if you read that, people want to keep reading. So I definitely recommend that. Your other book, so it's called Sundays at 8:30, Life Planning.
It's called Sunday at 8:30, 2 Decades of Life Planning. Okay.
And we know some of the fruits of that kind of life planning, what happens, because that other book came out of your life planning, right?
Yes, it did, exactly. So our life planning process, just to give you a little teaser about that, we do some brainstorming about what's the kind of life that we'd like to have. So we create a vision for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we explore 7 different areas of life. So that would include health, it would include career, it would include finances, and one of the areas is spiritual. And so my friend, she knew that I'd been going through this, trying out all these different things and learning about Reiki and crystals and all these things. And she said, you really ought to write a chapter for our spiritual sections. We have a section in our book for each of the 7 areas of life. And so she said, for the spiritual chapter, you really ought to write something about your spiritual journey. And so I started to do that. And then I called her one night, Sunday at 8:30, and said, it is way more than a chapter. And she said, write a whole book. Just go ahead and write a whole book on it. So that definitely did come from that process.
What do you tell people who are afraid of spirituality or don't like it, don't know it, just don't have a feel for it? How would you explain what that is, or what metaphysics are?
What it is? Well, the nice thing, I have a daughter who's an astrophysicist. So I have to always kind of support my beliefs with science. So when I talk about crystals, for example, and I thought before I got into it that there was nothing to it, that it was just superstition, carrying a crystal around or whatever. But I've learned through that as we know, everything has a vibration to it because we're made up of molecules and atoms that vibrate. And something like a crystal is a very stable substance as opposed to the human body, which is made mostly of water. And so this more stable substance has an influence, stabilizing influence on the human body because the water is more fluid. And so there is a science behind carrying a crystal that is going to have an influence on our own molecular vibration. So I tell people that, while we might think that it's just superstition or, crazy stuff, there's actual science behind it. And there's a lot of, I'm not a scientist, but other than the fact that I was an engineer at one time, there's a lot more, research into the energy fields and all of those things that to back it up.
I think you're right, and I bet there's a lot of scientists out there carrying crystals in their pockets.
I bet they are
and not telling anybody.
They might not be.
Yeah, they're not telling anybody about it. So what do you think this is? So we're in the middle of the quarantine. Looks like it's in the middle. It looks like it's going to keep going. What do you think spiritually that this has provided for all of us, if anything? And do you think there's any different energies occurring? What do you think is the big picture here?
Of course, I think that everything is meant to be. And so, this is happening for a reason. I think that we've harmed our earth. We haven't taken care of our earth, for a long time. And this has forced us to kind of pause and kind of rethink, what the pace of our lives, the heavy traffic and pollutants that we're putting into the air, just the fact that we're rushing up and doing things and not sitting and just being with our family and loved ones and contemplating our souls and our spirits. And this has kind of forced us to do that. And it's beautiful in many ways that, when you see the pollution having been reduced and where I see families out walking together with their dog and, that they never would have had the time or taken the time to do that before. And so I think there's many, many beautiful aspects to it, even though certainly there may be inconvenience to it. And there's certainly the fear of the disease for many people. And I don't want to belittle that. There's many tragic and frightening things happening in terms of the disease itself. But I think it's something we can definitely take some positive things away from.
I'm sure you'd agree that we don't want to do anything that would certainly harm or lower our immune system. certainly, therefore, our vibration. So taking into account any of the, there's so many things being said out there, of course, but we want to be empowered, right? We want to be empowered so we can do all things we want to do and keep up-leveling, perhaps spiritually, if you will.
Yes, absolutely. So self-care, critically important, eating the right things and taking care of ourselves and getting enough sleep, and all of those things very important, and certainly taking care of ourselves and taking care of each other. So being safe and, doing things that our medical professionals tell us are the right things to do in terms of distancing and,
so
help us to help others.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the beginnings of, for people, sort of spirituality 101. What is, in metaphysics 101, what's metaphysics 201 or 301 for you in this process? Some people call it an ascension process, an ability, a time for people as a collective to move forward together, to allow for the conditioning we've had to sort of break down. I see a lot of people walking the spiritual path more than ever, which is why I want to make sure I get the magazine out as well. What do you see in that for yourself?
Absolutely. I think that there's so much power in community and in a shared mindset. And we've seen negative things around shared mindset, right, in our culture, and just difficult things happening and unhealthy things happening. And the more and more of us who are awake and aware and engaging in elevating our consciousness, I think that the more we are going to heal ourselves and heal our earth, and all be together in a better place.
Yes. And it's going to be interesting one way or another. They say, may you live in interesting times, and we certainly do.
We certainly do.
Okay, so Rebecca Thompson, thank you for being here. Thank you for. Can you tell people where they can find you and order your books?
Yes, absolutely. Well, my books are Rebecca Rising by Rebecca Thompson and Sunday at 8:30 by Rebecca Thompson and Darlene Ryan. Both of those are available on Amazon in paperback form and on Kindle. I also have a website, which is called Evolve Without Limits. So all one word, evolvewithoutlimits.com. And I can be reached on there. You can fill out my contact form, or I can also be reached on email at rebecca@evolvewithoutlimits.com.
And they can get a chapter or two of Rebecca Rising from you through this interview.
Absolutely. Yes,
Excellent.
You can.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing all that, and for spreading your message.
Thank you, Scott. It's my great pleasure to be here.
Okay. And thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.